In the 1970s, seatbelt use was more of a personal choice than a safety requirement. Many cars, especially older models, didn't even come with seatbelts in the back seats, and if they did, people often ignored them. It was common to see kids moving freely around the car, sitting on the armrests, or even standing on the back seat during long drives. The idea of buckling up just wasn't a priority. At the time, many drivers believed seatbelts were restrictive, uncomfortable, or even unnecessary. Some even thought they could be dangerous in certain accidents, fearing they might get trapped inside a wrecked car. Because of this, compliance remained low, even after safety campaigns pushed for change. It wasn't until 1984 that New York became the first state to enact a mandatory seatbelt law, and even then, many people resisted. Over time, more states followed, and by the 1990s, seatbelt laws became the norm. Today, studies from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, confirm that seatbelts reduce the risk of death by 45% for front seat passengers and up to 60% for back seat passengers. Looking back, it's shocking to think how casual people once were about a life-saving device we now take for granted. Minimal child car seat regulations. Back in the 1970s, child car seat laws were practically non-existent. Most parents relied on standard seat belts to keep their children secure, and many didn't even do that. It was common to see kids bouncing around the back seat, lying across the bench, or even standing up while the car was in motion. Some parents placed babies in makeshift carriers or simply held them in their laps, believing that their grip alone would keep them safe in an accident. At the time, car seats existed, but they were designed more for convenience than safety. Many models were simply booster seats that helped kids sit higher so they could see out the window. There were no strict crash testing standards, and very few parents considered car seats essential. It wasn't until a groundbreaking 1985 study by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, NHTSA, revealed that car crashes were the leading cause of death for children aged 1 to 4 that attitudes began to change. Today, every state has laws mandating child safety seats, and studies show that properly used car seats reduce fatal injury risk by 54% for toddlers and 71% for infants in passenger cars. Back in the 1970s, cigarette advertising was impossible to escape. Everywhere you looked, TV commercials, glossy magazine spreads, towering billboards, there were images of rugged cowboys, stylish socialites, and smooth-talking actors making smoking look effortlessly cool. The Marlboro Man and Joe Camel became household names, and catchy slogans stuck in people's minds. Tobacco companies weren't just selling cigarettes, they were selling a lifestyle. But growing health concerns about smoking led to a major crackdown. In 1971, the U.S. government banned cigarette ads from TV and radio, marking a huge shift in tobacco marketing. That didn't stop the industry, though. It simply adapted. Instead of commercials, cigarette brands flooded magazines, plastered their logos on race cars and sporting events, and even slipped their products into Hollywood movies. The ban may have pushed tobacco off the airwaves, but it didn't stop cigarettes from remaining a dominant part of pop culture. It wasn't until decades later that stricter regulations on advertising and sponsorships made a dent in Big Tobacco's influence. Smoking on airplanes. Flying in the 1970s was a completely different experience from what we know today. Step onto a plane, and you'd be greeted not just by flight attendants in stylish uniforms, but also by the thick haze of cigarette smoke lingering in the cabin. Airlines had so-called smoking and non-smoking sections. But in reality, the smoke didn't care about the seating chart. It drifted everywhere. Whether you were a smoker or not, you were breathing it in. For the entire flight, for years, this was just an accepted part of air travel. Passengers casually lit up mid-flight, ashtrays were built into every armrest, and cigarette smoke mixed with the scent of jet fuel and in-flight meals. But, as the dangers of secondhand smoke became harder to ignore, pressure mounted to change the rules. The first step came in 1988, when smoking was banned on short domestic flights in the U.S. Over the next decade, restrictions tightened until, in 2000, smoking was completely outlawed on all U.S. flights. In the 1970s, if you were 18, you could vote, serve in the military, and in many states, legally buy a drink. The push to lower the drinking age gained momentum after the 26th Amendment was ratified in 1971, lowering the voting age from 21 to 18. The argument was simple. If young adults were mature enough to vote and be drafted into war, they should be trusted with alcohol. Many states agreed, and by the mid-1970s, the legal drinking age had been lowered to 18, 19, or 20 in most of the country. However, this change came with serious consequences. Fatal drunk driving accidents surged, particularly among teenagers and young adults. Studies showed that alcohol played a role in more than 60% of traffic deaths, with a significant portion of those fatalities occurring among drivers aged 16 to 20. Concerned about rising numbers, lawmakers took action. In 1984, Congress passed the National Minimum Drinking Age Act, which pressured states to raise the drinking age back to 21 by threatening to cut federal highway funding. One by one, states complied, and by 1988, all 50 states had adopted the higher drinking age. Today, it's hard to imagine a time when 18-year-olds could legally grab a beer, but for a brief period in the 70s, that was the norm. In the 1970s, drinking and driving were shockingly common, and legal blood alcohol concentration (BAC) limits were far more lenient than today. Many states allowed drivers to get behind the wheel with a BAC of 0.10% or even higher, well above the current national standard of 0.08%. In some places, law enforcement took a relaxed approach, often letting intoxicated drivers off with a warning or a suggestion to drive safely. Alcohol-fueled parties, bars, and even corporate events often ended with people confidently driving home despite having had several drinks. Many believed they could handle their liquor, and the social stigma surrounding drunk driving was minimal. It wasn't until the late 1970s and early 1980s that the tide began to turn. A major turning point came in 1980 when Mothers Against Drunk Driving (MADD) was founded after a grieving mother lost her child to a drunk driver. MAD and other advocacy groups fought hard for stricter DUI laws, public awareness campaigns, and tougher enforcement. By the mid-1980s, most states had lowered the legal BAC limit to 0.08%, and drunk driving began to be seen as a serious crime rather than just bad judgment.